discussion time. But before that, we're going to answer questions on 1 Samuel 19. So if there's, not that I can locate them or anything, but if there's anyone that needs questions, I would look them up if I needed to. Okay. Okay. If you need questions on chapter 19 and actually the 3, 19, 20, and 21 are on the same page. So if you don't have that page, Richard has them, if anyone. Anyone else? Questions? Okay. Over here. I'm glad that you're with us today. It's a good day to be out. The sun is shining, and it's a good day to come together, study God's Word. If you would join me in prayer this morning. Gracious and wise God, our Holy Father, we're thankful for the day that you've given us, for the blessings that we've already seen this day, Father. The blessing of life and the air that we breathe, your creation that we are able to enjoy. We are thankful, Father. Continue to bless us this day, if it be your will. Help us to be better Bible students than we've been in the past. Help us to have the understanding that you would have us to. And help us, Father, in the application of your word to our life. Be with us in our walk each day. Place our feet in the right path. Direct our thoughts in the way you would have us to. And help us to never believe the lies of the devil. Father, again, we are joyful to be here, to study your word. There are those that are not here because of illness and infirmities of the flesh. We ask that you be with them, restore their health, and we're thankful for those whose health has been restored. Be with us in this hour of study. In Jesus' name, amen. Be gracious to me, O God, for man has trampled upon me. Fighting all day long, he oppresses me. My foes have trampled upon me all day long. For there are many who fight proudly against me. When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise. In God, I have put my trust. I shall not be afraid. What can mere man do to me? All day long, they distort my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They attack, they lurk, they watch my steps as they have waited to take my life. Because of wickedness, cast them forth. In anger, put down the peoples, O God. You have taken account of my wanderings. Put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Then my enemies will turn back in the day when I call. This I know, that God is for me. In God, whose word I praise. In the Lord, whose word I praise. In God I have put my trust. I shall not be afraid. What can man do to me? Your vows are binding upon me, O God. I will render thank offerings to you, for you have delivered my soul from death. indeed my feet from stumbling, so that I may walk before God in the light of the living. Psalm 56, written by our brother David, and in a time of distress, in a time that he needed more to lean on the Lord, in a time that, as the psalm indicated, that he was being sought after. His life would be taken away from him, probably, if they caught him. And so the future king had to be preserved. He is now living the life of a fugitive. And Saul chases closely. And so I read that as we begin our study this morning. Before we delve into chapter 20, though, I'd like to go ahead and answer the questions on chapter 19. And if you have those, you can retrieve them. Sister Cunningham, did we get to you? Is that you were the last one? So Joe, you're next. Is that right? Okay. So I don't think there was any doubt or secret that Jonathan befriended David and delighted in that friendship with him. All right, number 2. Brother Darrell.
Number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Did Jonathan trust his father's assurance toward the peace of David? He did, in that he told David and then called David to come out to him and talk to his father at that time.
Right. So this, in this case, he did at this particular time. All right, number 3. Okay. She let him down through a window, and then she made some type of disguise in the bed, the idol that was there, and fixed it up so that it would look like David, and told him that he was sick. And then, is that the next question? Okay. All right, James, number 4. Well, at least our stories matched up, so. Sorry about that. All right, number 5. Anybody on the back row?
What happened to the messengers who were sent to take David at Mount and Ramah? Those that went as to get him ended up prophesying.
Okay, so they ended up prophesying as well. All right, number 6.
What about when Saul himself went? He also prophesied.
Okay. And that concludes the questions on chapter 19. So we'll reserve the other questions till later. Okay, so we have David fleeing. The last verse asked the question, is Saul also among the prophets? And of course, that was by God's intervention that it was made to seem that way. And so David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came and said to Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my iniquity, and what is my sin before your father that he is seeking my life?" So David begins to ask questions. What's going on, and what is the problem here? And so he confides in David, and he will continue to confide in David for the next couple of chapters. And it's a kind relationship that they have. It's a love story, in fact. And today's society, you know, they would probably make fun of that some way or make it to be something that it's not. But it is indeed one man's love for another. And however difficult it is for us to discuss that and say that, the fact of the matter is the Scripture tells us that, because they give one another's heart to the other. And so in verse 2, he said to him, "Far from it, you shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing, either great or small, without disclosing it to me. So why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so." And so Jonathan begins to reassure David that this is not going to happen, especially in that he has his father's ear, so to speak, and he feels that Saul will not commit this act without letting him know first. So Jonathan begins to attempt to comfort David. In verse 3, yet David vowed again, saying, "Your father knows well that I have found favor in your sight." And he has said, "Do not let Jonathan know this, or he will be grieved. But truly as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there is hardly a step between me and death." And so David felt death was close by. It was imminent. And he expresses, some of his distress, as any of us would be if we're living the life of a fugitive. If we know someone is chasing after us to take our life, and I've never been in that situation, but maybe some of you have, and I'm sure that you would feel some type of stress, even though we know that the Lord was with David. And so David still maintains his faith in all this. He still maintains his courage, but he does sometimes exhibit some type of distress or discomfort with what is going on. And Jonathan, then in verse 4, then Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." And so Jonathan reassures David that whatever it is that he needs to do, he will do just that. And just like we talked about, there's a love between them, there's a bond between them, and it grows stronger as the story progresses. Whereas Saul's situation kind of digresses. So there's a progression on one side of this equation, and quite the digression on the other. So David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I ought to sit down to eat with the king. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field until the third evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, because it is the yearly sacrifice there for the whole family." And so this new moon was some type of festivity or meal that they would have at this time of year. I went back and looked at Numbers 28. I didn't necessarily find the words new moon, but it was a sacrificial type religious meal that they would have. And so David was expected to be at Saul's table for that meal. Now, obviously, there's a bit of deception going on here because Jonathan is going to tell his father that he has gone to Bethlehem to be with his family there. And that would not necessarily be out of the ordinary, but it would in this case because David was now in the royal court, of course, being Saul's personal harpist, and so he would have been expected to be there. In verse 7, if he says it is good, your servant shall be safe, but if he is very angry, know that he has decided on evil. Therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is iniquity in me, put me to death yourself. For why then should you bring me to your father? And so David is here trying to still work it out in his mind, exactly what's going on, trying to figure out how Saul is going to respond to this. And just tells Jonathan, if there's iniquity there, if there's something that I need to be put to death for, go ahead and take care of it. And so, of course, Jonathan doesn't do that. But verse 8, David proposes the obvious, whether good or bad. And he deals with it. And he is still inquisitive as to the iniquity that might exist. In verses 9 and 10, Jonathan again affirms the friendship. Jonathan said, "Far be it from you, for if I should indeed learn that evil has been decided by my father to come upon you, then would I not tell you about it?" And David said to Jonathan, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" So the plan is being devised as to what will be the response, and then what they will do to get this information to David. Jonathan said to David, "Come and let us go out into the field." So both of them went out to the field. Then Jonathan said to David, "The Lord, the God of Israel, be witness. When I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow or the third day, behold, if there is good feeling toward David, shall I not then send to you and make it known to you? If it please my father to do you harm, may the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not make it known to you and send you away, that you may go in safety, and may the Lord be with you as he has been with my father." So, as we read that, we have to keep in mind that Jonathan is kind of put in a position here to, I guess, improvise against his father. And that's difficult to do no matter what your parents may have done to you. It's still difficult to go against what they say or what they are and what they're about because, of course, Saul had taken or attempted to take Jonathan's life as well. And back in earlier chapters, even when he made the rash vow that they were not to eat, and Jonathan had taken some honey. Saul was pretty much comfortable with letting the people, or letting him be killed at that time. Had it not been for the people saying, "No, not a hair from his head will be harmed," I think Saul would have been okay with Jonathan losing his life at that time. So, all that being said, and of course Jonathan having the success that he had on the battlefield as well, not near what David had, it still would have put him in a difficult position to devise this plan really against his father. All right, questions or comments? Brother Keith.
Yeah, as you was talking and everything, you can see the anguish that David is going through. But of course, you try to put yourself in his position to understand what he's going to say. And he's already admitted that he's taken a bear, and taken a lion, and taken a liar, because the Lord helped him. And the Lord has pretty much forgiven him Saul's throne. He knows all of that. And he's having all these conquests and battles. But the situation that he has with Saul is giving him a lot of fire. Why don't you just go to Samuel the prophet and just ask the Lord, what is the situation here and what do you want me to do?
Mm-hmm.
But here he is, he's fighting with himself, trying to figure this out. Of course, I don't know why he did that. Of course, we don't know because we never developed. It's interesting that we see the humanity or the weakness of David in this situation right here. He's not able to take command of the situation. He's let the situation drive him,
Mhm.
him about the situation. So should have just come to Samuel and said, hey, ask God, what does he want me to do?
Yeah.
Instead of being, tossed and pulled between these two extremes.
Mm-hmm. Could have been, and I think David still wanted reconciliation with Saul to some extent, and that's what he was fighting with. He had a chance to kill him 2 times later on, and he knew that he was God's anointed. So a lot of thoughts and emotions going into that, distressful time. Brother Greg?
A comparison between our culture today and culture then. Here you have 2 men, mighty warriors, not afraid of fighting against great odds.
Mm-hmm.
We might call them men. What are they talking about? Fear and love. In that culture, between 2 very close friends, well, closer than friends, brothers, they were completely efficient, safe, and they were talking about feelings and emotions without the fear of being thought of as effeminate, perhaps in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Now, somebody talks like that as a sissy kind of thing.
Right.
And the difference is, these are men. And they didn't court not proportion of themselves. That's the lesson for me today. Even our culture that tries to suppress the expression of true feelings and emotions, especially amongst men, and to have close friendships. But that's not necessarily what God intended. And there's nothing to be afraid of in sharing with, say, people, good friends, brethren,
Mhm.
especially brethren, how we feel, what we need, what we pray.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation. It's a difficult situation today for we men to express our emotions to another man, especially. That's where you need a woman in place. So a lot of things David was going through, like you say. And you don't ever, well, I don't know if ever is a good word to use, but you don't often get a lot of things settled in a physical fight. I mean, he could have went to Samuel and asked what to do. He could have went to Saul and said, well, let's just take care of this, man to man. But what would that have accomplished? And I think they were given it time to kind of play out, to see what was going to happen. And I think, Keith, you're right that David was just uncertain, which place to step. And so with that, comes the uncertainty and running, and you make decisions. Obviously, in the next chapter, he's going to make a bad decision, but he learns from it, and he learns to move forward. I would hate to know that I had to go through a situation like that without the Lord at all. And I'm so pleased to know that in the conversations that Jonathan and David have, the Lord is mentioned quite often. Whereas, if you go back to Saul, the Lord's not mentioned that much as it is in the same light with David and Jonathan. In fact, 2 times it says that that Saul feared David. You know, Saul feared David. And my question to that is, why didn't Saul fear the Lord? You know, more than he feared David. And I just think that was part of the illness, as we've called it, that Saul had. In his mind, he wasn't able to allow that. All right. Other questions or comments?
One thing I noticed is that David continues to try to figure out logically
Mhm.
why this is happening. What's sin I know?
Right.
I know I'll be glad to fix whatever I've done.
Mhm.
The fact is Saul is acting irrationally, emotionally, and nothing logically. And so this problem can't be solved by logical.
Right.
And he is honoring Saul as God's anointed.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, until Saul comes around, there really can't be one.
Right. Yeah, it's like Saul's playing with a different set of rules than David is. Yeah, you're right. David is trying to say that there's got to be something to this, you know. And when really it's not. It's all jealousy and envy. Saul was completely jealous of David, and the anger just burned, and so much that, you know, it drove him crazy, so to speak. Okay.
And to add to that, we see again that he's lost all his sins. And he's tried to kill David how many times, and he still expects him to come and sit and kill him.
Right. Yeah. Now, normal people wouldn't think that way. Normal people would say, well, I've tried to kill him twice, and so, you know, why won't he come over here and eat with me, you know? And Brother Darrell?
We hit all around it, but it comes down to one thing, and that's Saul has sin. And sin drives you further and further and further away.
Mm-hmm.
And further into whatever situation you want to be, because when you have this jealousy, you have a burning desire to get rid of someone. As we heard Bob talk about, we never address that sin and never get rid of that sin. We just kind of go around it. This is what Saul did. He never addressed his sin to the point that he would get it straightened out. And we can see how they carried him to places he normally shouldn't go. Cost him more than what he ever wanted.
Yeah.
And various other things we can see.
I think you're right. And he never reconciled that, and I think that, you know, obviously David would have liked to see that reconciliation, but it just wasn't meant to be. Okay, so moving down into 16, verse 16. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord require it at the hands of David's enemies. And Jonathan made David vow again because of his love for him, because he loved him as he loved his own life. And then Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed because your seat will be empty. And when you have stayed for 3 days, you shall go down quickly and come to the place where you hid yourself on that eventful day, and you shall remain by the stone Ezel. And so they would know where this place was. The plan then as to what they would do after Saul's response to the empty seat. But I want you to notice again that Jonathan very much reiterates his love for David. He loved him as his own life. You know, and Jesus, of course, had that love for all of us. And, you know, many men died before, many men will die after. But that one significant death is the reason that we are here today. But it's very difficult for us to understand that type of love, to love someone so much that you would give your life for them and not even know them. And in fact, someone who is in sin, who continues to live in sin. There are a few people that I would give my life for in a heartbeat. And, that's just something you don't think about. I recall Devin and Amy one time coming and running, saying, this man wanted us to get in the car with him. It was at the end of the driveway. I did not think 1 second when I got in my car and I went to chase him down. And I confronted him. He could have had a gun. He could have had a knife. He could have had anything. But I didn't care. Because he was going to have to take my life before he took them. One other occasion is the love I had for a brother that I still have. But after getting a knife thrown at you and a shot with a BB gun and a few other things you're hit with over the years of fighting, you would think that you wouldn't have that kind of love for them. But we ventured out one day, and we were going to swim across the river and somehow get up on this pylon that was out in the middle there, concrete pylon, and dive off of it. And so here we go. And so Ben got out there first, and he turned and he looked at me, and I can describe it nothing more than you need. He was in trouble. And me thinking out of my head, I guess, I thought he'd gotten into a bed of snakes. That's the only kind of thing I could come up with. But he was drowning. And we were out in the middle of this river, and it was several feet deep. But at that instant, I committed to myself, if he dies, I die. I didn't know how to save the person. I had no idea. And he was hitting me, kicking me. And the only thing I could think of, I got to get down and push him up. And I pushed him up with everything I had until I couldn't hold my breath any longer. And when I came up out of the water, there was a boat there, and a guy had a paddle down. You don't know how I felt. So we got carried back to the bank in a boat, and so we didn't go back out there again. And so it was around July 4th, and we got in the car, and Ben said, okay, let's go shoot some fireworks. And I said, yeah, right. But, there are a few incidents where you'd give your life for someone. And I think Jonathan, in a heartbeat, would have given his life for David. That's the kind of love they have. And I think that love, along with God's help, is what partially got David through this difficult situation. In verse 21, and behold, I will send the lad, saying, go find the arrows. If I specifically say to the lad, behold, the arrows are on the side of you, get them, then come, for there is safety for you and no harm, as the Lord lives, which is what they would have liked to have seen. But if I say to the youth, behold, the arrows are beyond you, go, for the Lord has sent you away. As for the agreement of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever. So David hid in the field, and when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat food. The king sat on his seat, as usual, the seat by the wall. Then Jonathan rose up, and Abner sat down by Saul's side. But David's place was empty. Nevertheless, Saul did not speak anything that day, for he thought, "It is an accident. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean." It came about the next day, the second day of the new moon, that David's place was empty. So Saul said to Jonathan, his son, "Why has the son of Jesse not come to the meal either yesterday or today?" Jonathan then answered Saul, "David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem." So, they got Saul's attention. And this is a test of sorts for David to try and figure out exactly what is going on. He's had the questions. He's concerned. He's trying to think logically, yes. But there is obviously no logic with Saul. It's all anger, envy, and jealousy that is burning inside of him. And you cannot predict what someone like that will do. In verse 29, for he said, "Please let me go, since our family has a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to attend. And now, if I have found favor in your sight, please let me go, get away, that I may see my brothers. For this reason, he has not come to the king's table." And then Saul's anger burned against Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you are choosing the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness?" And so Jonathan was in a unwanted place, I guess. A place that he didn't necessarily want to be, but he was there because of his love for David, or he never would have orchestrated any of this. Wouldn't have had to. But he was doing this because of his love for David. "For as long as the son of Jesse lives on earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Therefore now send and bring him to me, for he must surely die." But Jonathan answered Saul his father and said to him, "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" And so Saul's not going to be able to answer that. He's not going to answer it because David hadn't done anything except maybe won more battles than he had, slayed more people than he had, slayed the giant. I tried to measure 9.5 feet the other day in my house, and I couldn't do it because my ceilings are only 8 foot. I got to thinking, Goliath, he would have had a hard time in my house. But then Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him down. So Jonathan knew that his father had decided to put David to death. In other words, he knew the answer. He got the message. Then Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and did not eat on the second day of the new moon, for he was grieved over David because his father had dishonored him. Now it came about in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field for the appointment with David, and a little lad was with him. He said to his lad, "Run, find now the arrows which I am about to shoot." As the lad was running, he shot an arrow past him. When the lad reached the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan called after the lad and said, "Is not the arrow beyond you?" And Jonathan called after the lad, "Hurry, be quick, do not stay." And Jonathan's lad picked up the arrow and came to his master. But the lad was not aware of anything. Only Jonathan and David knew about the matter. So you might say, well, why didn't they just go and tell each other? Well, I don't think as they made this plan, they would have known necessarily who would have been there. So they carried through with their plan. The plan had already been made, so why not carry through with it? There might have been more people in the area, but as it turns out, there wasn't. So the plan worked as they had scheduled it to work. And so the information that David needed, required, was given to him in this arrow language and that they had devised. And so David already knew what was going on because of the plans that they had made with the arrows being shot beyond the lad. He knew that he would have to flee, even though he had not been told by Jonathan. But nevertheless, the lad does what he is asked to do. And then, of course, in verse 40, he is given Jonathan's weapons and told to go to the city. And at that point, then, they were able to see each other. These good friends, this is probably one of the last times. I think he sees him one time before Jonathan's death. But this is the, I guess, last meeting, one of the two last meetings of these two men who loved each other so much that they would give, or Jonathan would give his life for David. When the lad was gone, David rose from the south side and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed each other and wept together. But David wept the more. Jonathan said to David, "Go in safety, and as much as we have sworn to each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord will be between me and you, and between my descendants and your descendants forever." Then he rose and departed, while Jonathan went into the city. So, they got the information from Saul. It was not that the information that they wanted to hear, but the message had been delivered. They now knew, or David now knew without a doubt. Basically, all of his questions had been answered indirectly, in that he knew one thing, and that was that Saul intended on killing him. And so, a lot of unanswered questions, but the one question that needed to be answered told David what he had to do immediately, and that was take on the life of a fugitive, and began to run and hide and seek shelter and ask for help along the way from different people, and try to avoid Saul at all costs until his administration was over, till his kingship was over. And David would, of course, let that be done by natural causes and would not strike God's anointed. Okay, that's chapter 20. More questions or comments? Donna? What season? The only thing I could find on it was the new moon feast. And I went back to Leviticus, and you may get more out of it than I did. I take that back. I went back to Numbers 28, 11 through 15 is where it's referenced to. Someone else may have more information on that, but it's just a feast that they celebrated this time of year, one of the many feasts that they would celebrate. And it would be I'm sure, a sacrificial feast of some sort, and that they would make preparations to have, the courtship or the family there to eat. Right. Yeah. All I can give you on that is what I'm sure Leon can tell you more, but what I found on it was just a religious feast that they had at this time of the year. Anyone else? Yes.
So with regards to Saul through the Spirit, it brought to mind again about the oath, chapter 14. That Jonathan disobeyed with regards to getting the honey in the field. Saul had told him, "You don't need anything until all these things are trampled down." And Saul was ready to put him to death then.
Right.
And Brother Darrell said,
Mm-hmm.
We're now, he's just looking, we trying to kill him. And here he is, the king of Israel, the children of Israel. Most Jonathan could be able to do.
Right. Yes.
He is the prince.
Yeah. And you know, I think David was playing the honorable game, and obviously Saul was not interested in playing that game. And so he played by whatever rules came about. You know, he couldn't answer the questions when they asked him, what has David done? There's no way he could answer that because, you know, sin had taken him over, basically. And so there was no way he could answer the questions. Anyone else? Brother Raymond?
You mentioned a while ago about David expected to be at the feast because his position in the court and all. Also, he was Saul's son-in-law.
That's right. Yes, that's a good point. He was Saul's son-in-law. I failed to mention that, but we went over that in the previous chapter, Michal being his wife. And so, yes, he would have expected to be with that family, that side of the family, instead of with his family in Bethlehem. So, good point. Thank you for bringing that up. In one of the versions, it says clan, be with his clan. Brother Rick?
Earlier, the emotions that men don't typically show in the situation. I think a lot of that has to do with we're not put in the situation, the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Put ourselves in a circumstance where I'm not going to be able to see this brother of mine ever again. That's the thought process.
Yes.
Or, you know, they're going, you've got a king that has all authority. Nobody can challenge him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if he says, come, you're supposed to come, or you die. Right? So there's that spirit of knowing that, hey, I'm most likely not going to ever see you. And my desire is to stay here with my family.
Mm-hmm.
Here. I'm forced away from this hiding where I think it'd be similar if we were going off to war. War is one that you don't anticipate winning, but you have to go in.
Yeah.
I think those circumstances causes our emotions to come out more and be displayed when we share those feelings
Mm-hmm.
than you do in what we typically, most of our lifetime, never.
Right. Never experienced. Yeah. Was different circumstances, different time, and different situations. Good point. Anyone else? What we will do is to plan on answering the questions on chapter 20 to begin next week's class. I'll be teaching again in Leon's absence, and then we'll begin in chapter 21. Thank you for your kind attention.